Hi, welcome to this lesson. So in this lesson, we'll be talking about something that's very important to JavaScript. So you can't write any program without these things, okay, these storage spaces. So we are going to be talking about variables, right? So variables are basically storage spaces, that is containers of information, okay? And as I told you, these are very important to any code in pretty much any language, okay? Without variables you can't write anything, okay? You can't write your code at all unless all you're going to do is print strings or text, pre-made text to your page. If you want to do anything else at all, you want to store information before you can retrieve it, you can manipulate it, you can add it, subtract it, and print it and things like this. So you need these variables. So these variables will contain the information that you need to be that you want used later on, okay? So for example, and this could be anything. It could be numbers, it could be characters, it could be strings, which is basically text that I told you about, and it could be anything. It could be a boolean, which is a false, truth kind of data. So it can be any of those things, okay, etc. So in real world scenarios, how would variables work out in real world programs and things like that? For example, let's say there are many instances where you would need to get input from the users, right? So you need to get input from the users, and then you need to modify it, or you need to work upon that input to get an output. That's how programs work. You get input, you give an output, right? Or you might need to get input from within the program itself. So you might need to get intermediate inputs from the program, intermediate calculations. You need to store it, and then you need to manipulate it again. So things like that. You might need things like that. In those cases, variables are very useful. For example, let's say you want to calculate the sum of two numbers, okay? So you need to get the two numbers, right? Without getting the two numbers, you can't calculate the sum. So you need to get the two numbers from your user. If you use pre-made numbers, if you just give numbers in your program itself, what is the use of it? That's just one set of numbers. What if you want the user to decide? What if you want your program to be dynamic? Because that's what JavaScript is about. JavaScript is dynamic, right? You can interact with the user. The user can interact with your program if you use JavaScript. So how do you do this? By using variables. You can ask the user for two numbers, and then you can get the two numbers, and then you can store the numbers in variables, okay? So these are named storage spaces, because you can basically give each variable names. Okay, so you can name it something, and then you can assign some value to it, or get some value from the user and then assign it to your named variable, and then you can reuse it. So that's why it's called named storage. Okay, let me give you one more real world example. What about a shopping cart? Let's say we have a shopping cart, okay, and you might want to get information on which product to add to the cart, okay, things like that. You can or what's the price of it, or how many or what is the quantity of each item that they want added. So you must have seen Amazon's shopping cart and things like that, right? There's a lot of user interaction on there. So each of these things, each of the user interaction, each of the information given by the user to the program would be stored in your named storage spaces called variables, right? So let's see how to create or declare these variables. So how do you do that? So to create or declare a variable, so creating a variable is called declaring a variable, okay? And then assigning value to it is called assignment, okay? So first we can create the variable, and then we can look about assigning values to the variable, okay? To do that, you need to use something called keywords, okay? You need to use the keyword let, okay? Without the quotes, you need to use the keyword let. Now, why is it called a keyword? It's called a keyword because it has a pre-made function. Okay, it has a pre-made functionality in JavaScript. Okay, let does something. If you use let, it creates variable. Okay, so that's why it's called a keyword. So there are a bunch of keywords in JavaScript, and each of those keywords have a specific function in JavaScript. So let creates variables. Okay, so how do we do this? First of all, you give let in here like this. See, look at this, the color changes, right? So no quotes, nothing, just let, and then you have to give the variable name. It could be any variable name. There are certain rules for creating the variable names, but it could be any name within the rules. Okay, so let's look at the rules now. So to create the variable, this is how you do it. So let, and then the variable name, and as usual you have to end the statement with a semicolon, right? So what are the rules for creating your variables? So I'll create that I'll write the rules inside a multi-line comment. So multi-line comment, so you can see how it works, right? So there are a bunch of rules. What are those? So first of all, the first character of the variable name should be an alphabet or underscore or $sign. Okay, and nothing else. Okay, it can be an alphabet, it can be an underscore, it can be a $sign. Nothing else, as in no numbers at the start, none of the other special characters. Okay, so that's very important. The first character can only be an alphabet. It could be caps or small, that's up to you. And then it can be an underscore or a $sign. Okay, now this is how underscore is written, right? That's underscore. Okay, and then the rest of the characters in your variables, they can be alphabets, numbers, again it can be underscores, you can use multiple underscores if you want, and then $signs, again you can use multiple $signs, but no other special characters. Okay, the only special characters allowed are underscores and $signs. You can't use the @ symbol or the hash, none of those special characters. Only numbers, alphabets, underscores or $signs. But when you start off your variable, there should be no numbers at all. Okay, and nowhere in your variable should there be any of the other special characters other than underscores or $signs. Right, that's the second rule. A third rule is variables are case sensitive. For example, if your variable is apple, okay, where all of the letters are written in small caps, then if you create another variable or if you try to use apple with a capital A to indicate this variable, you would get an error because this A is different from this A. So this apple is different from this apple. So if you want to reuse this, you have to write it as it is. Okay, your variables are case sensitive, right? And then there are certain reserved words which we just looked at, right? I told you one of the reserved words or one of the keywords is let. Okay, so there are a bunch of keywords. They cannot be used as variables. Now it's very obvious why that's the case, because these words, they have specific meaning, right? So for example, if you use let, that means it's used to create variables, but you can't name your variable let. Your computer or your browser is going to get confused. So you can't use any of the reserved words or keywords in JavaScript as your variables. And as we go on, you would come to know all of the reserved words in JavaScript, what their function are and things like that. But I will give you a list of all the reserved words so you can know which ones you can't use. Okay, right, so that's how variables, those are the rules of your variables. So let's take all of these rules into account and let's create a bunch of variables. Okay, so as the first rule said, that it can start with underscore, $sign and nothing else, right? So your variable can start with underscore like this. Okay, it can start with like this. It can just be apple as well. but it can't be like this. See, the color changes, right? If you use any proper editor like the brackets, it'll show you that you're making mistake, that you're making a mistake just by changing the color. See, this is not a variable at all. If I remove this, it's gone back to its purple color, which basically means that you've written the variable right. And let, it's blue in color, which means that you've used a keyword. Okay, so with user friendly or programmer friendly editors like this, you'll know when you're making a mistake. Right, so these are things that you can. And the second rule said that the rest of the characters can be alphabets, numbers, underscores, dollar signs like that. So let a or underscore like this, or okay, all of those things are correct. But if I give any other special character at the start, that's not gonna work. If I give any other special character afterwards, that's, see, there's another change in color. That's not gonna work. And if I use a reserved word as my variable, see, it's creating two words with, okay, both of them are colored blue. That's not right, right? So this is how you can try out a lot of, if you have brackets or if you have some other editor like that, you can try out a lot of variables and see which ones are properly colored, so you know which ones are correct for you. Okay, just use those rules and you'll never go wrong with your variable naming. Okay. So that's it for this particular lesson. So we've looked at what variables are, why they are used, and why they are called named storage spaces, because you give them a name basically. And we've looked at all of the rules, rules where how the variables should start. And so we looked at how the variables should start, what the rest of the characters in the variables should be, why they are case sensitive. That is, we've seen that they are case sensitive. I'll give you an example for this later on. And then we've looked at why reserved words don't work, because they have special meanings, right? So you can't create variables out of them. So we looked at all of those things. So we'll keep looking at variables and assigning values to variables in the next few lessons. So I'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you.